when to fight for a relationship versus let go. There is a version of you that believes loyalty means never leaving. That if you just become more patient, more understanding, and more forgiving, eventually the relationship will return to what it once promised. But sometimes what keeps a relationship alive is the very thing slowly killing the people inside it. Not every bond is sacred simply because it lasted a long time, not every ending is failure, and not every act of staying is love. Some people are fighting for connection, whereas others are fighting against reality. And the most painful part is that most people cannot tell the difference until their inner world has already collapsed. Because attachment can disguise itself as devotion, fear can disguise itself as commitment, and loneliness can convince a person to remain in places their spirit quietly outgrew years ago. So the real question is not how do I save this relationship? The real question is what exactly am I trying to save? Is it the relationship, is it the history, is it the identity, or is it the version of yourself that once felt chosen? Tonight, we are not speaking about romance alone, we are speaking about human attachment. The invisible contracts people make with suffering. The difference between enduring with purpose and remaining out of fear. And somewhere in this conversation, you may realize that what you called love was actually exhaustion wearing sacred language. Why humans cling to dying relationships. Human beings do not simply attach to people, they attach to meaning. A relationship is never just a relationship. It becomes a memory archive, a psychological shelter, a mirror, and a future imagined so many times that the nervous system mistakes imagination for destiny. This is why letting go feels less like separation and more like identity death. The mind begins bargaining. If I try harder, if I heal more, if I communicate perfectly, if I stay long enough. But not all persistence is wisdom. Some persistence is merely the inability to grieve. There is an ancient pattern within human nature. People often remain loyal to what wounds them because pain feels more familiar than uncertainty. A predictable ache can feel safer than an unfamiliar freedom. So many relationships continue not because both people are growing, but because both people are afraid. Afraid of starting over, afraid of silence, afraid of becoming irrelevant in someone's story, and afraid that leaving means the years meant nothing. But time alone does not sanctify a relationship. A prison inhabited for 10 years is still a prison. And yet there are relationships worth fighting for, deeply worth fighting for. The difficulty is that modern culture rarely teaches discernment, it teaches extremes. Either, never give up on love or leave the moment things become difficult. But mature love exists beyond slogans. Because healthy relationships are not built by avoiding struggle. They are built by two people willing to face truth without turning away from it. The question is not whether pain exists. Pain exists everywhere humans exist. The question is, what is the pain producing? Is it growth, humility, clarity, and repair, or is it erosion, confusion, self-abandonment, and slow emotional starvation? One kind of suffering deepens character, the other dissolves it. And wisdom is learning the difference. When a relationship is worth fighting for. A relationship is worth fighting for when truth can still enter the room. Not perfection, not flawless communication, and not constant emotional harmony, but truth. Can both people acknowledge harm without weaponizing vulnerability? Can responsibility exist without endless defensiveness? Can repair happen after rupture? Every meaningful relationship experiences rupture. But healthy bonds contain movement. There is confession, adjustment, softening, and return. The relationship bends, but does not calcify. A relationship worth fighting for is not one without wounds. It is one where wounds are not ignored. Because ignored pain does not disappear. It buries itself beneath ordinary conversations, beneath routine, and beneath intimacy. Until eventually two people become strangers performing the memory of connection. Another sign a relationship is worth fighting for is one where both people are willing to confront themselves, not just each other. Immature love asks, how can I change this person, whereas mature love asks what patterns within me are contributing to this cycle. This requires humility, and humility is becoming rare. Many people want intimacy without transformation. They want unconditional acceptance without accountability. But real love refines. Not through domination, but through revelation. A healthy relationship reveals where the ego hides, where fear controls behavior, and where unresolved pain silently demands reassurance. And if both people are willing to grow through that revelation, the relationship can become sacred ground. Not because it is easy, but because it becomes honest. Another sign is the relationship still contains emotional safety. Not comfort but safety. Comfort means avoiding tension, safety means truth can survive tension. Can disagreement occur without humiliation? Can emotions exist without punishment? And can boundaries be spoken without emotional retaliation? A relationship worth fighting for protects the humanity of both people, even during conflict. And perhaps the deepest sign is the relationship still nourishes aliveness. Even in difficulty, there is movement toward light, toward expansion, and toward deeper integrity. The soul does not feel perpetually diminished. Because healthy love does not require abandoning oneself to maintain connection. Love was never meant to erase identity, it was meant to strengthen it. When it is time to let go. There comes a moment in some relationships when the suffering stops being transformative and becomes repetitive. Nothing changes, only the explanations become more sophisticated. Promises repeat, patterns repeat, and apologies repeat, but reality remains untouched. This is where many people become trapped. They confuse emotional intensity with emotional depth. But chaos is not intimacy, and longing is not always love. Sometimes longing is simply the nervous system addicted to unpredictability. A relationship may need to end when one person consistently abandons truth. Not by making mistakes, as humans will always fail each other, but by refusing responsibility, refusing reflection, and refusing repair. Because no relationship survives without honesty. Where deception becomes habitual, trust slowly suffocates. And once trust collapses repeatedly, the soul begins living in constant vigilance. Always scanning, always anticipating, and always shrinking. This is not love, this is survival. A relationship may also need to end when staying requires self-betrayal. When your boundaries become negotiable simply to preserve attachment. When your voice becomes smaller to avoid conflict, and when your inner world becomes chronically exhausted. There is an ancient wisdom echoed across generations. A tree disconnected from nourishment eventually appears alive long after decay has already begun. Many people remain in emotionally dead relationships because the external structure still exists. The messages continue, the routines continue, and the photographs remain. But inwardly, the spirit has already departed. And perhaps the hardest truth, love alone is not always enough. People can love each other deeply and still destroy each other psychologically. Because compatibility is not only emotional. It is ethical, it is spiritual, and it is behavioral. Shared affection cannot compensate for repeated disrespect, shared history cannot replace emotional safety, and shared chemistry cannot heal chronic instability. Sometimes letting go is not abandoning love, it is refusing to abandon reality. And reality eventually demands a decision. Not because endings are beautiful, but because prolonged dishonesty fractures the soul. The hidden fear beneath letting go. Most people do not fear losing the relationship itself. They fear the emptiness that follows. The silence after constant stimulation, the absence of familiar messages, and the collapse of imagined futures. But beneath all of this lies a deeper terror. If this relationship ends, who am I without it? This is why some people remain attached long after connection has died. The relationship became an identity structure. Without it, they must finally confront themselves. Their loneliness, their wounds, their dependency, and their unfinished grief. And modern life makes this confrontation difficult. Distraction is everywhere, and performance is everywhere. People curate emotional images instead of building inner substance. But eventually every human being reaches moments where illusion can no longer protect them. Moments where they must choose between comfort and truth. This is the deeper purpose hidden inside relational endings. Not punishment, revelation. Some endings expose where we confuse being needed with being loved. Others reveal how much of our identity depended on external validation. And some endings become sacred interruptions. A dismantling of false foundations. There is a quiet spiritual principle repeated throughout human history. What is false eventually collapses under its own weight. Not because existence is cruel, but because reality continuously moves toward truth. And relationships built on illusion cannot remain stable forever. The question then becomes, can you allow an ending to teach you, instead of merely destroy you? Because pain can either deepen consciousness, or harden the heart. The choice often depends on whether a person seeks wisdom from suffering, or only escape from it. Self-diagnostic reflection. So how do you know whether to fight for the relationship, or let go? Not through impulse, not through temporary emotion, and not through advice designed for strangers. You know through radical honesty. Sit quietly with these questions, not to judge yourself but to hear yourself clearly. When I imagine staying in this relationship long term, does my body feel expanded or diminished? Am I consistently becoming more honest, or more performative? Can truth safely exist between us? Do both people take responsibility for harm? Is growth actually occurring, or only being discussed? Am I attached to who this person truly is, or attached to their potential? Do I feel emotionally nourished more often than emotionally depleted? Have I confused familiarity with compatibility? Am I staying because of love, or because I fear emptiness? If nothing changed from this point forward, would I still choose this life? And perhaps the most difficult question, what part of myself already knows the answer? Because deep within, most people already sense the truth. But truth often arrives quietly, not dramatically. It whispers long before it demands. There is no universal formula for when to stay or when to leave. Human relationships are too sacred, too complex, too deeply tied to memory, fear, hope, and identity. But perhaps wisdom begins here. Love should move human beings closer to truth, not farther from themselves. A healthy relationship will not eliminate suffering, but it will make suffering meaningful. It will create space for honesty, repair, humility, and growth. And when those things disappear completely, sometimes letting go becomes an act of integrity rather than abandonment. Not every ending is evidence that love failed. Sometimes endings reveal that love has reached the limit of what two people were willing, or able, to become together. And there is dignity in accepting reality without hatred. There is dignity in releasing what no longer carries life. A forest does not mourn every fallen leaf forever, it understands that decay and renewal belong to the same cycle. Perhaps human beings are not so different. Some relationships are seasons, some are mirrors, some are lessons, and a rare few become lifelong sanctuaries. The challenge is learning not to force one category into another. Because peace rarely comes from controlling outcomes, it comes from aligning with truth before illusion consumes the soul. And maybe that is what maturity truly is. Not becoming colder, not loving less, but learning to love without abandoning reality. If this video spoke to something unspoken within you, leave a comment below. What is one sign that tells you a relationship is worth fighting for? Or one sign that tells you it is time to let go? Sometimes the wisdom others share becomes the mirror someone else desperately needed.